Welcome to the City Movement Podcast. Each episode, we will dive deeply into the Christian mission of the YMCA, provide practical tips for planting churches and Ys, and discuss the benefits of planting churches and YMCAs. We're your hosts, Jeff Snyder and Mike Newman. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Let's jump into today's episode. Well, welcome into episode 2 here in season 2. Happy New Year.
Season 2.
Season 2.
We're getting old.
Is that
or maybe
right?
just experienced.
Experience.
Season 2. We're seasoned.
I'm definitely not
well
getting old.
seasoned.
Yeah. Happy New Year. It is 2022. This is Jeff Snyder. I'm here with Mike Newman and a guest we've been waiting to have on the podcast. You've never been on the podcast, right?
I've not.
We've been waiting to have on the podcast since our
season
inception.
1.
Yeah.
Right.
Since season 1.
Saving me. Okay. All right.
We've got Chris Johnson here. Mike, why don't you give Chris Johnson, why don't you read his brag sheet?
Okay.
Yeah, we've got a brag sheet for Chris,
you
right?
know, I've got it memorized.
Yeah.
I've got Chris Johnson has been married for 23 years. I guessed on that. I know you're over 20. 24 years.
You were really close.
To Allison Johnson. Great marriage. Loves his bride. And he's got a whole slew of kids.
4
of them.
Full quiver.
A full quiver. Doing a great job. Lives off of Waynesville Road.
Wow.
And
you giving the social
is
security
low
number
detail.
too?
mows his grass, listens to audiobooks while he mows.
That is accurate.
And runs.
So I would guess in this month of January that, what are you doing for listening to books right now?
I've actually, part of the new year, working out more at the Y. I'm
All
a
right,
participant
come
at the
on.
Y, not just a leader at the Y. And
Okay.
I've been listening to books while I've been doing that.
Okay.
So no mowing right now, but
Okay.
I've been getting my audiobooks
Well,
in.
give us a little foreshadow. What are you listening to right now? What?
So I'm actually listening through Lord of the Rings again.
All right.
Nice. That is a good
Okay.
start to the year.
So I don't enjoy working out. I need a good book in my
Yeah.
ears to almost distract me from
That's
the fact
good.
that I'm working out.
That's good.
So
I hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've been.
How was that rap sheet?
Could use some work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you would have maybe remembered. Did you mention that he's the CEO of the YMCA?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, Chris is the CEO of the Countryside YMCA, which is kind of the YMCA Association where our churches gather.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been a CEO there for almost 4 years.
Yep.
And for the 10 years before that, he was a pastor at the church that I pastor, Antioch. And before that, he was in sales at General Electric.
Was
Were
it
you
GE
sales?
Healthcare? GE Healthcare.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now he's here.
No, I'm here at the Y.
On the podcast, the City Movement Podcast. We're glad you've joined us. Mike, why don't you give us a preview of what we're looking at today?
Yeah, so we are going to get to know the man, Chris, not just CEO vocational tips of how to run a YMCA or whatever in a Christian principled manner, but we, I think the goal of the podcast is for listeners to hear, how does a leader walk with Jesus? How does he lead people? How does he lead an organization? And all the while tending to his own soul, staying vibrant for Christ, and living out of the overflow of that.
Yeah,
I love that.
that'd be good.
That's
Yeah, so I mean, the main reason we have Chris on is, Chris, we just think you are, there's a lot of good CEOs out there in the YMCA. I don't know a lot of them, but I'm sure there are a lot of really good ones.
Yeah.
But you're, in terms of the ones I know, you're pretty great at following Jesus and leading an organization.
Well, thank
So
you.
I think if we could just glean some wisdom for our viewers and
Yeah.
listeners from you on how you follow Jesus and how you lead in the YMCA and how those things commingle, I just think that would be a great win for this podcast.
That's right.
All
So
right.
open up the floodgates.
Yeah, let
Johnson.
me even jump in a little bit on that bio piece. There was a call when I was at GE. So I was at GE 12 years, and there was this call out of GE into ministry. And it was a very specific to the community that is Antioch, but it was to our church, this very specific. I want you to care for, love, minister to this group of people. And from corporate world into ministry, that was a major change in lifestyle, in calling, in future plans, in all of those things. And I tell people that the call 4 years ago to leave the church and go to the Y
Was one of the most scary moments of my life.
Well, it was Jeff's
Let that be
life because he
clear.
moved in.
Yeah.
But
Chris told me
Yeah.
to. I was like, that's a funny joke.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
But I compare it as it wasn't that radical of a change for me in that moment. I was already called to kind of love, serve, and care this community in a church. And I felt God was taking that same kind of call on my life and just saying, you're going to do the same things. I'm just going to give you a little bigger audience. And I'm going to move you over to the YMCA. So in terms of, I would say, call on my life, being the CEO of the Countryside YMCA is not that different than when I was one of the pastors at Antioch.
Yeah.
And I've tried to view it that way, that this is still a ministry role. I've had people, it's like, oh, so you moved into the ministry and then you moved back out of the ministry. And I'm like, I just don't look at it that way. You know, I really look at my role here at the Y in that way. Now, I'll say a little bit about Countryside. We're fortunate. I have a board that prioritizes the Christian mission of the Y. And so even as part of hiring me and empowering me, they have my back when I lead that way. And I'll say another thing is, for all that the pandemic has been negative, I felt even more freedom to lean into faith and lean into our Christian mission during the pandemic. As staff have come to me, as members, as people in the community, have just been desperate.
Yeah.
In
You
so
actually,
many ways.
You're teeing up a question I was going to ask. So tell me, what's it been like? I mean, obviously you pastored and shepherded and counseled people for years at Antioch. What's that looked like over the last 2 years during this pandemic at the Countryside YMCA? Has that opened up doors for you to, even just more boldly, with more care, obviously, to pastor people?
Yeah, I think it starts with, we for years as a YMCA, local YMCA, and I think as a YMCA movement, we've been trying to communicate we are more than a gym and swim.
Yeah.
That's always been the big pushback. And so we are more than this, we're more than this, more than this. One of the first things I did with my people when COVID hit is I said, you know what, this is our chance to walk our talk.
That's right.
They closed down the fitness part of who we were. Like just the mandates, we weren't allowed to be open as a gym or swim. And so the challenge was, now how do we stay present? How do we stay engaged, involved in this community in a way that proves what we've been saying all along, is we're more than this. And so in our case, it meant pandemic childcare for first responders. It meant food collection places. Eventually, it meant we were a place for vaccine administration. It meant we were gathering things. We were calling. We were visiting. So we tried to remain as true to our nature of caring for others, being there for people in the community as we could, even when we couldn't do that thing that is so often associated.
Yeah, that's great, man.
So that was number one. I mean, it kind of gave us, I think, the freedom to be what we've said all along we wanted to be. And then for me personally, again, there were so many doubts and questions that everyone had. And so I just got to model. It's like, when we would have team meetings, we would pray, and I would just ask the Lord for wisdom and protection. It's like, God, we don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. Help us to know what to do next.
Yeah.
And so you just get to say that over and over and model it. Because the other thing that I was amazed at.
There's a prayer of Jehoshaphat.
There you go.
Yeah. It's a great prayer. Yeah.
And we get to say it over and over.
Yep.
Because none of us knew what was happening.
Yep.
And so people, though, for some reason expected, because I have those 3 letters CEO after my name, thought somehow we had an inside track on like answers. Like they would come into my office. So what's the governor going to say today? I'm like, I have no idea. I'm going to watch him just like you are. And when he says something, then we're going to react to it. And we're going to try to do so with wisdom and discernment in the moment. And so there was a lot of that where people expected that somehow I knew something or had some information that wasn't publicly available, and it wasn't true. And so to be able to, I say, model dependence, even as a leader. The other thing, we had to make decisions every day during that time, and we didn't get them all right.
Yeah.
So it also gave you a lot of chances to come back and say, hey, we missed that one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We made the best decision we could in that moment. But now the next day we're going to go back and say, you know what? We're going to do it different now because we've learned something new in this time. And so even just to be able to model I think the dependence of, I need help on this because I don't know. Model the humility to say we missed it and we're going to do it different going forward. And then to just show that, hey, when I'm in those situations, we pray about it. And then we try to discern the best step forward.
That's great.
And so it's really good. And there were a lot more opportunities where people then, after seeing that, come in and begin to share their personal story.
Yeah.
So my counseling ministry went up, in this role as CEO, as more and more people, both staff and members, would start to come in and say, can I ask you a question? Hey, can I share something with you? Here's what I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
Would you pray over me for this? So I thought I was kind of walking away from that role in some ways. And I was surprised by how often I still got to play in it.
Oh, man.
What a great model for YMCA churches even to lead with. Dependence on the community of faith, humility, and prayer, leading with prayer. I just think that's a great way to lead out for our churches and for you as a CEO.
For husbands, for daddies, lead out with, sweetheart, I don't know. How about we pray together on this one? Let's figure it out together.
That's great.
Yeah. And there was a lot of, again, like I go back to, no one knew. And in many ways, we still don't know. And so, for anyone to stand up and say, I have the answer, should cause us to be nervous at some point. So to just boldly say, I don't know, but I know who I'm going to turn to, is a powerful moment to lead from that. Because people aren't used to their leaders being humble, unfortunately, in many cases, So, but I can also say it's scary as a leader to stand up in front and say, I don't know.
Right.
Because people are looking at you to have the answers. When you have a staff that, hey, my job depends on your decisions, my livelihood, our future, all this depends. You want to reassure them.
Yeah. You're talking to two pastors here, so we're going to follow up with a question. So here's a soul pastoral question. So why do you think it's hard for a man to say, I don't know?
Because we always know.
Well, I know that. I know the answer, but I'm just,
that's what I always tell Kelsey.
You guys both know. Exactly.
Of course I know.
Like what's some of the insecurities that you feel in your heart?
Yeah.
When you're like, if I say I don't know, then what's some of the things that you're like anticipating that they would either see about you or? So
I'll go to the most basic first.
Yeah.
It's my job description. My job description as CEO is to decide.
Yeah.
It's to lead and decide on these things. And so just like any other job description, when someone walks in and says, hey, I want you to do that thing we hired you for.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know how to do that right now.
Right.
All right, now I become worried about, am I going to have a job? If you figured out that I don't know what I'm supposed to do, then, and so I think at a basic job description level, there is, it's my job to decide. And that's still true. There's a quote, and if someone out there can tell me who actually said this, I would love to know. I've heard different names, but leaders decide.
It's probably Vince Lombardi.
It probably is. It's probably Packers something.
Get out of here.
But the quote is, leaders decide. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always they decide. And so sometimes you just, hey, it's the time of day where I have to make a decision. And I'm going to make it.
Yep.
And then I'm going to hold it loosely. And I might have to come back and change it. And so that was some of how I could get through that. It's like, hey, people are looking at me to decide. They're looking at me to know. And I may have to make a decision. And I need the freedom to be able to say it was the right one, it was the wrong one later on, and come back.
That's good.
Now, that takes, again, I mentioned before, I have a board that's behind me.
Yeah.
I felt the freedom to kind of live in that way. And I felt, again, assurance from the Lord that, hey, I'm protecting you even in these decisions.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece. So I do think there's job description. I think just, our manhood, we think we're supposed to know things.
I know, man.
We're just, whatever that is that sin, nature, world on
our
whatever.
identity is so tied up within our vocations, and
Yeah.
it's our worth.
We're just supposed to know, and there's probably an insecurity there. Well, if I don't know, what good am I for? You know, and so you got to be able to release that as well.
I got another question for you. All right, so like healthy or decisions come from like a healthy. I suppose not all decisions come from a healthy heart. Like a healthy decision comes from a person who's fostering their own hearts. So like help us get to know a little bit more of Chris Johnson. Yeah. So here's me tying in some resolutions. Okay. It's too bad that resolutions have a bad rap these days. Yeah. It's too bad because it's like goal setting is a positive.
It is good.
Healthy
Do resolutions have a bad rap these days?
I think so. Everyone has this mentality of like, oh, I'll set them for January, but there's no way I'm going to keep them.
That's fair.
As a Y, they're great for January membership numbers.
Oh, yesterday was packed.
So people show up in January, they're ready to go, and then we're just keeping them. Come on, you can do this. Stick with it through February, March. Okay. Now I will turn future as to kind of, so as I step into the new year, I mean, I don't often use the word resolutions, but I would say my goals, which is the same thing.
Give
my
us
goals,
some smart goals, Chris Johnson.
I don't know how smart, but
even
resolved in goals.
Maybe like
very Edwardian.
A little bonus point if you can tie them into the YMCA. You know, the YMCA cares about your mind, your body, and your spirit.
Well, that's a good straight man. So I basically have mind, body, spirit goal for me. And I've thought as the organization, what are kind of our mind, body, spirit goal for the year. So for me personally, on the mind side, I can have a tendency to be a workaholic. So whether that's physically or at least in my mind of always thinking and processing on work. And so I'm trying to have some more intentional rest time. I'm trying to have some more intentional what I would call enjoyment reading time or enjoyment viewing time, but also, and this is probably me rationalizing a little bit on the work, but I need some dream, vision, strategic time. You know, I need to give myself out of the tactical and into the, you know, what's long term. So that's kind of on the mind side. Body side, I mentioned before, I've been working out. I'm trying to be a participant at our Y and not just the leader of our Y. And it's really been, we're 3 weeks in, so check back with me. But it's really been fruitful of just even members and other staff, how encouraged they are by seeing me.
Oh, yeah.
Participating and doing. And
now, where are you participating? It's like the yoga rooms, or
he's in the Stolly Center.
He's in the
No. That is for 50 and older. I am not yet 50. I'm close, but I'm not yet 50. No, I've been mostly on the elliptical or the treadmill.
Okay.
So far.
Good on the knees.
So I'm going to start a little cardio, and then the goal to get into some of those other areas.
Excellent.
So that's on the body side.
Let me just affirm that. I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing to see the CEO of the YMCA participating in the physical side of the YMCA, right? I mean, like as pastors, I would want our people to see us working out our faith and following Jesus. And a part of leading a YMCA is the body.
I mean, yeah, and there's been, like I said, staff and members have really been encouraged. But I'll say the other thing is, like, even 3 weeks, I have insights into things as a participant.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm like, you know what? I've gotten in the shower where there was no soap, you know, or I've heard this feedback from the member on the treadmill next to me, you know, or I've heard, they don't know that I'm who I am as I'm there necessarily, and I'm just overhearing things. And so there's actually been some really good insight of just being kind of that managed by walking around, but this is to the next level of actually managed by participating within.
That's right.
And it was good. And then the spirit side, I am doing a daytime fast as we kind of start the year. And trying to use that time. I think the main thing the Lord's kind of pressing on me this year is to be even more intentional. What I'd say is my pray in the moment. And so for me, as it comes to decisions, you know, taking that moment to pray in the moment, or when I'm talking to somebody and they say, "Will you pray with me or for me?" And I say, "Yeah, I'll pray for you." Instead of walking away and thinking I'll add that to my prayer log or sometime later, say, "Yeah, can we do that right now?"
Yeah.
And actually in that immediate moment kind of respond in prayer. And so those are kind of my personal goals for this year. I like to say this is what God and I are working on for Chris, you know, in the right now. And then from an organizational standpoint, on the mind side, we're really trying to focus in on kind of the mental health aspect. So many people out of this pandemic are struggling there. Just in general anxiety, mental health, or a very specific feeling of isolation. And so we're trying to make sure we're building our messaging and our programming to address that.
That's great.
Yeah. On the body side, we're trying to go where people are. Instead of saying, you have to come to our building, can we find ways to send our people to where you are or where you feel comfortable gathering if you don't feel coming to our large place? And in the spirit side, it's making sure they just know they are cared for, across the board. You are cared for deeply. We want to know you. We want to know what your goals are. We're not just trying to plug you into our stuff. It's like, and so I think that's the first step spiritually, where people can build a trust where they feel like that. Sorry.
Those are great. Those are great things.
Trivia: which president of the United States managed in the same way that you mentioned, walking his estate and riding his horse every day?
It's got to be
George
Donald
Washington.
Trump.
That's right. Come on, man. Mount Vernon.
That's right.
That's how he did it.
He was up early and would be on the horse out
Yeah.
over the estate.
Yeah. So you're at the modern day George Washington.
Did you learn that from Hamilton?
Okay.
No, from George Washington, the book.
Yeah.
Such a reader.
Actually,
So
Chernow book. Ron Chernow wrote the Hamilton book that led to the Hamilton musical, and he also wrote a great George Washington book.
it's pretty great.
Anyway,
Good to know.
some of my reading, while on the lawnmower or the
Uh-huh.
treadmill,
Yeah.
I get some of these great audiobooks.
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, Chris, let me just affirm that you are a great leader for the Countryside YMCA.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate
You do
that.
a great job. What a privilege that God has called you into that position in this season of your life and the season of our churches that are associated with the Countryside YMCA.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, I think a good question would be just how can we be praying for you as you lead your Y, and how can we be praying for the Y, and maybe
just to draw it even closer to any of our listeners or viewers that are pastors of YMCA churches or members at Ys, how could they pray for their Ys?
Yeah, can I say one thing as you do that, just to listeners who are out there? I guess I'll offer this. As years as a pastor of a church in a Y, and now as a CEO of a Y that has a strong relationship with the church, I just make myself available to anyone who's listening from either side of that. If you're in the Y world and you say, I want to hear perspective. If you're in the church world, I want to hear perspective. Because I feel like I've walked both sides of that. And so kind of have that look at the relationship from kind of both directions. And so would offer that. It's a kind of praying for us as a Y, Ys in general. The Y as an organization has not... there's been a lot of change over the years, but I think it's been a reactive change.
Yeah.
And so to kind of have the boldness to make big decisions that are going to be necessary for recovery in many of these communities, that's not our history. And so we need that, I'd say, that prayer of boldness over leaders and Ys to be able and willing to change, and to be able and willing to respond to changing communities and changing needs within our communities. It's easy to just kind of woe is me. It's like, oh, this community looks different than what it used to. I wish it looked like it used to. And that's not going to get us to where we need to go. And so even for me, I need dream time. I'm trying to help my staff. It's like, I need you to have time in your day, week, month, year, where you raise your eye level and look out 3 years, 5 years. What do we need to be doing today to prepare us for that? And that's not our DNA. We're very serve in the moment as an organization. And so I think that's one of the prayers is just, hey, give us that boldness to change, that margin and time to be able to think forward in that way. And then this is, again, it sounds trite sometimes, I think, but again, the eyes and ears of Jesus to look at our community and say, what are they calling out for? What are the needs? And then how can we step into that? Too many times we say, hey, here's what we do, and we want to invite people into what we do. And we need, as an organization, to say, what are the needs? Yeah. Now, how do we move into that? And it might be it might be just dropping some things that we've been doing for a long time that no longer meet a need and saying, all right, we've got to switch and do something else. And those are scary thoughts, and I know those are scary thoughts because we're dealing with them on a day-to-day basis. But I think for the why to continue to grow and expand, that question of relevance is always a thing. And I'd like to turn that relevance question into what are we doing to help people, and not less of what are we saying.
Yep.
Okay,
so if I could summarize, pray for the boldness to make, and I might maybe add a word here, but like gospel-oriented changes. Because it would be very easy to see what the culture might be telling you in your town and say, okay, I want to make a bold change, but it might not necessarily be in line with what Scripture teaches. So boldness to make gospel-oriented changes, time to dream and vision cast, and kind of like the wisdom needed to make decisions of how to respond to needs in a relevant way.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. I think those are great things to pray for all YMCAs and churches. Like, we can pray for those same things for our churches.
Completely
in terms
agree.
of wisdom. So anything else we would ask Chris or exhort any of our viewers or listeners in terms of the YMCA church relationship?
To be continued with Chris Johnson. Yeah. I'd say subscribe and let's do this together.
Yeah, Chris, if you're comfortable with this, if any of our listeners or viewers if they have any questions or would want to reach out to you, what would be the best way to do that?
I say chris.johnson@ymcastaff.org. That's my email. It's the best way to reach out to me. And I just tell people, one of the favorite conversations I get to have is about Christian mission within the YMCA context and how churches and Ys come together to serve the Lord. So I love those conversations. So would love to have anyone reach out at all.
Awesome. We love those too.
Yep.
And if you want to get in contact with us at the City Movement, you can go to thecitymovement.com. Our email address is uscitymovement@gmail.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you already know our YouTube channel. Just search for us at The City Movement. That's it, right?
I think so.
Okay, Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
It was great to have you. Yeah. For Chris Johnson and Mike Newman, this is Jeff Snyder, and that was the City Movement Podcast.